I'd like to call the public session to order. Please stand for saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this point, I'd like to call to order the public hearing of the renewal of the charter for Niagara Charter School.
And I believe it looks like we have maybe somebody who signed up from the charter school to speak.
Okay.
Can you hear me through that?
Yes.
And you can certainly take that off because you're certainly social distanced.
Okay. If that's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Darcy Novak. I'm the Chief Academic Officer of Niagara Charter School. First and foremost, I wanted to thank your board for being so timely in scheduling us on your agenda for our renewal. We have our state visit coming up now in December, so we appreciate this taking place in October. I'm here tonight just to give you a little information about our school. If you've never seen me stand here before you over the last few years, I've been the Chief Academic Officer there. I've been with the school since we opened in 2006, and I've been the principal now going on 10 years. So I've been in front of you before for our renewals. We are looking for a 5-year charter. We have been in your district since 2006, so we're going on our 15th year. In terms of our enrollment with Niagara Wheatfield, historically speaking and continuing, it's very low. So we have about 16 of your students that actually attend our school. The majority of our students come from the Niagara Falls City School District. We just happen to reside in your district. We've had a wonderful working relationship with your district in terms of transportation arrangements, special education services, and any other facets that we've had to work collaboratively together. So also thank you for that. Like I said, we've been there 15 years. We're a K-6 building. We have 350 students. Right now, no plans to expand. The plan is to stay K-6 and 350. So for the last 3 years of the current 5-year charter, we have been outperforming the Niagara Falls City School District as well as the state as a whole in ELA and math across the board. So despite differences of political opinions about charter schools and funding, we are doing best for students that didn't otherwise have a choice or an opportunity. So we're asking the state ed department for another 5-year renewal. We don't anticipate and cross our fingers for nothing but good news on that. And that's a little information about us. And if there's any questions I can answer for you as a board, I could do that now. If not, I just thank you for your time and thank you for all your seats tonight for our staff to represent our school.
Are there any questions from any board members? I had a question for funding. I know that I've seen you before, obviously here. This is my 10th year here with this. We've spoken before about the funding, the formula that the state gives and everything. Let me ask you about your, I looked at a couple of your audits from the comptroller's office over the past like 7 or 8 years, and taking a look at your fund balance that you have, it appears as though almost your fund balance, or I forgot what the earmark that he had on there as what the determination of it was, what they called it, almost appeared to be like double your operating budget. How do you feel that in fairness towards public schools, where we are only able to carry a 4% fund balance as opposed to a almost 100% fund balance?
Well, for us as a charter school, we do not receive any facilities or state funding in terms of maintaining our building. We also do not own our building, so we pay a considerable amount in rent. And so the goal was originally and someday to possibly purchase our building. So actually some of the monies that we've been acquiring was to do that, because for us, where we're located, one, we don't own our building. Number two, we'd also have to pay for transportation for all the students from Niagara Falls. So we have a lot of costs because we've been enjoying our time here in Niagara Wheatfield, but there might be a time where we need to look at purchasing a building or purchasing our current building. And so in terms of my understanding of our financials and what we look to possibly spend that money on is for our building in the future. and or just giving it back to our students, as of recently, because funding is different, so we don't get a lot of the same funding that a traditional district was. We, used money to purchase devices for families, during COVID, and so a lot of expenses like that are what we use that money for.
So you have like an earmark for it. I mean, you have a plan for that. It's not just basically sitting there because I know it.
We're not, it's not just sitting there collecting interest. That's what you mean.
Well, I mean, in the public side, in talking, and honestly, it hasn't been many from the Wheatfield district. It's more, I talked to the board members in the Niagara Falls district who can't hold the hearing, and obviously, as you said, majority of students are drawn from there. So the question, a couple of questions came up, is that that's not money that's earmarked towards whoever is the grantor of the charter, or the company that owns the charter for the school.
We're
It's not.
authorized through the state ed department, so again, some of our funding looks very different. And so when we talk about, your facilities and like your grounds, for example, as a large district, some of these things are reimbursable to you, or you get funding or support from the state. We do not. So, let's just say, for example, my heating and cooling system happens to break, and we have to completely redo the HVAC system. That's at an expense to us. There's no reimbursement. There's no funding from the state. So we have a lot of expenses that aren't necessarily the same expenses as a traditional public school that we have to plan for and prepare for, to be prepared versus underprepared for the uncertainty of the future.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, then. I will, if there's nothing else, for the good of the order for the hearing, I'll close the hearing for Niagara Charter.
Again, thank you very much. We'll see you in 3 years.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. We'll have our audit presentation now then for Drescher and Milecki.
Good evening.
If you want to hold on a second, we'll let them.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, guys. Thank you.
Steve, we also need a motion to move it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't going to do that during the presentation part. I was
You do
probably
it
do that
later.
during.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the new business.
New business, right?
Yeah.
All set? Yep.
Mhm.
All right, good evening. My name is Luke Galecki. I was the partner on your external audit for the year ended June 30th, 2020. We did meet with the audit committee prior to this meeting at length and went over the details of the audit. They serve as your liaison between the auditors and the full school board. My purpose today is just to give you a brief presentation of the overview and the results of the audit, as well as a really bird's eye look at the finances for the year ended June 30th, 2020. In front of you are several different materials that you'll be hopefully accepting tonight. They're not official until that acceptance does go through. So just keep that as it may, but we did want to get that information in front of you. The one thing that I'll be walking you through is the actual PowerPoint presentation. I'll refer to the other documents in front of you. So the first slide, the products of the audit. The district does have 3 different types of auditors. The external auditors, which is myself, which gives an opinion on the basic financial statements. Financial statements are the responsibility of the business office. Our job is to perform a series of tests to determine whether or not they fairly represent the district's financial position at June 30th and for the year then ended. We also have an internal auditor, which will look at the internal audits, the internal control cycles within the districts, and a claims auditor, which will go through the voucher process. As I said, our job is to perform a series of tests. We did that in August, and we're able to form what we refer to as an unmodified or a clean opinion. In other words, based on the results of our test, we feel that the district's financial statements fairly represent, without material misstatement, the position of the district for the year ended June 30th, 2020. That report is dated tonight, the date we had our communications with the audit committee, and it's referred to as a clean opinion. Within that document, which is really the biggest document that you have, the financial statement package, there's also 2 other opinions, professional opinions that come from our office. One relates to government auditing standards. Being a municipality, you're subject to the Yellow Book or the government auditing standards, which really means that we are required to look at your internal control structure as it relates to the financial reporting. So a lot less in depth than your internal auditor, but we still are exposed to internal control structure. If anything came to our attention during our audit that warranted the attention of the school board, we would classify that as a significant deficiency. And if that significant deficiency would potentially cause material weakness, we'd have to report that as material weakness.
We had no such findings that came to our attention, so a clean report as far as your gas opinion goes as well. We also perform what's referred to commonly as a single audit, and that's an audit of your federal award dollars. On a rotational basis, we'll look at federal award programs. You received $3 million approximately of federal awards. This year we tested the school lunch fund and found that you were in compliance with the requirements that the federal government sets forth. So a clean audit in that report as well. So all told, the actual, what we would refer to as reportable findings, a clean, as you'd expect, audit. There's also a unique caveat about your district in that you have the Tuscarora School. So you'll find that you have two sets of financial statements. The Tuscarora School financial statements are the thinner document, and that is just a document that relates to only the activity within that school. All of that information is embedded within your main package within the district. It's part of your general fund of the district, but the state does like to see those isolated because they are reimbursing you, be it as it may, in a slightly delayed manner for them running that school. We also include within the package two letters, the first being a management letter. Management letter are items that we'd like to bring to the attention of the board and the public reading the financial statement package, but doesn't really necessarily qualify as a reportable finding. This year, we had two items within there that we did talk at length with the audit committee. However, I'll just mention them briefly and invite you to read more within the letter at your own leisure. The first being that your claims auditor abruptly left in April of this year, leaving a unfilled position that's required under New York state law. Being that it's funded and it was just basically a transitional item, we didn't see it as a finding, but we did want to bring it to the attention that's important that that position gets filled sooner rather than later, and I know you're well on that way. We also noticed in one of your extra classroom activities, there was an event that should have charged sales tax that did not charge sales tax. Management's been brought to management's attention, and they're going to make sure that the next onboarding process for the extra classroom activities will incorporate the events that would trigger a sales tax transaction. The next other letter that you have included within there is your auditor communications letter. That just goes through a series of responsibilities and roles of us as the audit firm and the board and management of the school. Finally, the last bound report, which is just a few pages long, is the extracurricular activity report, which summarizes the activity of your 39 or so programs that are student run, have about $180,000 worth of activity, and we do test that, the internal control structure there to gain confidence that they're following the structure that the business office is putting forth. And aside from that sales tax item, we had no exceptions in that testing. So pretty clean area of audit as well. Shifting briefly to the financial statements summary, on pages 52 and 53, you'll see the voter approved budget performance as compared to the actual. And it's actually summarized through as a 5-year trend on your slide as well. In this past year, the voter approved budget planned to use $1.3 million of fund balance. Additionally, there was a carryover of about $700,000 of expenditures from the previous year that were frozen and to be made in the next year. So all told, the plan was to use about $2 million of fund balance. Revenues tracked right close to their budget. There was actually a favorable revenue variance within the native tuition reimbursement. However, that was pretty much offset by a reduction in state aid. In this past year, as you well know, the state has threatened and actually come forward with withholding some of the district's aid. About $600,000 of that related to activity within the general fund, and the business official took the more conservative method in writing that off, and that it hasn't been received within 60 days of year end, thereby it wasn't recognized as a governmental receivable. So that is impacted within these financial statements to a portion of what was already been withheld. So revenues kept pace with budget, ended the year at $72,809,000. On the expenditure side of things, there was significant savings within certain areas of the budget, namely the central services. We saw savings with utility maintenance and repairs. Teachers, regular schools had some unfilled positions, as well as some significant savings within substitute teaching. Being in the quarantine period, no substitutes were required. We saw a reduction in costs for programs for pupils with handicapping conditions, because this district really has the budget for the maximum cost of providing those services, and it did not have to fulfill all of the allotted expenses this past year. We also saw a pretty big savings within the transportation contract. It was a matter of being settled when the budget was being presented. Fortunately, it was settled not quite to the expectation of the budget. And on top of that, there were 3 months of activity that was not covered through the year due to the quarantine in March through June. Finally, the health insurance, you're self-insured, so you have to kind of budget for the maximum loss and coverage on there. Fortunately, you did not have to feel that full exposure, and you had about $1 million of savings there. So with those savings, you were actually under budget on the operating expenses substantially. However, there was a voter approval to use about $6 million of the transfers out. So that kind of offset all those savings, and we actually saw the fund balance in the district go down by about $2 million, but that related mostly to your reserves, and your unassigned fund balance, as you'll see, actually increased a little bit from the year to year. When you look at it, revenues from this year compared to last year, very similar years. We saw a $247,000 increase on a $70+ million budget. $247,000 isn't much, so not much relief in the form of revenues. Most of that increase came from the increase in real property taxes, which was about $734,000. Again, a very nominal number when you're looking at a $72 million budget. And that was offset partially by the reduction in state aid of $400,000. State aid was tracking similar to 2019 until the 20% reduction that we felt in August ended up being actually reduced from 2019 numbers by about $450,000. Expenditures looks alarming at first that it went up $6.9 million, but this graph includes transfers out. So the transfers out accounted for $6.8 million of that $6.9 million increase. Large chunk of that was related to transfers that went into the capital projects fund, but an additional portion, about $200,000, actually had to get transferred to the federal aid fund for that 20% reduction in program specific for the summer school program and for UPK. So all told, that 20% reduction that was announced in mid to late August cost the general fund as of now $800,000 in 2020 numbers. Remains to be seen what's going to happen in 2021, obviously, but with the threat of the 20% reduction, you could be exposed to up to $6 million of lost revenue if the state comes true on that promise, or that threat, however you want to phrase it. Once you pull out that transfers out numbers, expenditures, very, very similar year from one year to the next, about $180,000 increase, and most of that increase went in the instructional lines, which is where you'd expect the school district's increase to occur. Ending fund balance in the general fund voter fund, which excludes the Tuscarora school, was $27.1 million. And again, it was a decrease of $1.8 million from the one year to the next. That information that I just explained was on pages 52 and 53 summarized. And the reason I isolate that is because on the basic fund financial statements, which is on page 14 and 16, it combines the voter approved budget with the state approved budget of the Tuscarora school. So that's just one little caveat that I like to point out with your district. So the next slide here, this combines the two funds now. This includes your general fund and your general Tuscarora fund. And your ending fund balance here is about was about $20 million, reduced to about $14 million in this past year. We did see the blue portion, which is considered unassigned, go up to $6.4 million. A large chunk of that is reserved for encumbrances, carryovers from the 2020 budget. There's a large number of vouchers that were made in the quarantine period that were unable to be fulfilled. So that number pretty much doubled from the past year. So although it looks like it jumped up 1.5 million, about 700,000 of that has already been spoken for and actually already been liquidated in the 2021 year. The red portion represents your restricted fund balances. That decreased by $7.1 million, and that was because of the approved use of that capital project reserve that I spoke on of $6 million, as well as about an $800,000 reduction in the transportation reserve for some bus purchases. That blue portion that I mentioned is broken out on the next slide, on slide 4, which shows that the top portion is that 3.3 million. That includes amounts that have been promised to be used or allocated to be used in the 2021 budget. Through the budgeting process was about $2 million. And then that $1.3 million of encumbrances, which are really just carryovers of 2020 that has been liquidated in 2021. The remaining portion, that $3 million or $3,084,000, represents the amount that's subject to the real property tax law 1318, which you referenced earlier, of the 4% rule. And that's your compliance with that rule is on the last slide, in slide 5. After being 3.6 for several years, the business office elected to go up to the full 4% and fund that $3 million to help offset some of the potential losses that you could face. Obviously, I did just mention that if the threat of the 20% reduction does come to fruition, we got you ballpark. We were talking with Allison earlier, somewhere between $6 and $8 million. $3 million isn't going to cut it. So that's kind of what the numbers are showing for 2021. Obviously, way too early in the year to see where this is going to go. If we learned anything from the last 6 months, as things change really quickly, as far as the finances and operations of a school district go. The last slide has my contact information as well as the manager that was assigned to this school district audit, Erica Hanley. Feel free to reach out and call us at any point in time as you're going through probably one of your most fiscally frustrating years in recent history. So that concludes my formal presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to handle those now. Again, if you have any questions that come up as you're going through the materials or throughout the year, feel free to reach us out at the office. We do work for the full district board. Even though we're mostly in contact with Allison, we're here for all you guys. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the consensus agenda items. I have to call for a motion to accept items 1 through 10 on the consensus agenda. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Any item to separate and discuss or to vote on separately? Okay, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. All right, for the personnel items, I'd like to call for a motion to accept the personnel report as submitted. I'll second it. We will separate items G4 and G33. So I'd like to call for a motion then to accept items 1 through 3, 5 to 32, and then 34 and 35. Actually, that motion's been there. We made that. I call for a vote then. I'm a little off on that, sorry.
Yeah.
So all those in favor then of accepting those items, as I just said, so basically every item except G4 and G33, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining, motion carries. Turned over to the superintendent.
And I will turn over to Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mr. Lulanich. I don't believe I have any battery here. I'm trying to call around.
On the far right-hand side, there's a little button. Push it in.
There we go.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to welcome Nicole Ganshaw. Nicole's in the back there. Nicole's going to be joining us as a new teacher over at Colonial Village, and then splitting the other half of your days at building-based sub-floors, really helping us out, especially as we go through the pandemic and providing us adequate coverage. So congratulations, Nicole. And also Christiana Covada. Christiana, welcome to the district. You're also going to be helping us with building-based substitute coverage, and we welcome you to the school district as well. It would be a great addition.
Thank you.
All those in favor of accepting items G4 and G33, please say aye. Aye. Opposed or abstaining, motion carries. Welcome to the Falcon family. All right, Capital Project Committee.
Just note that we do have a capital project committee meeting coming up November 4th, I believe it is. 4th. November 4th.
Just one item that I did discuss with the superintendent, I shared with him, is that there's a couple things I asked the contractors to look back at to take care of. You care if I bring that piece up? We're behind the softball backstop on the actual concrete that was poured. It's right around the bleachers. There's a lot of like pieces flaking off already and chipping in between the where the expansion lines are put in for it. So I sent some pictures to the superintendent, asked them to take a look at it and have our contractors look at it because it's very noticeable. I did walk on the far side, the baseball diamond. There's nothing back on the big baseball, so it's just on this side.
And they did walk around, they looked at it, they noted, and they're, yeah, thanks.
Policy committee, first reading of policies. Would you like to read them or shall I?
I love hearing your voice. So
Nah, yes.
have at it.
All right. Then we'll have the first reading of the following policies. As this is coming from a standing committee, we do not need a motion or a second for them to be put before the board. So we will have a vote tonight for the first reading on policy 6150, which is the alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other substances policy. Policy 7220, graduation options, early graduation accelerated programs. 7222, diploma or credential options for students with disabilities. Policy 7260, the designation of a person in parental relation. Policy 7320, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, and other substances for students. And policy 8241, patriotism, citizenship, and human rights education. Anything that you want to highlight into these policies?
I would just, if I could, just on the two that concern credentialing and graduation requirements, what they've done with both those policies is they've just made them more broad, shortened them. It seemed as though every couple of years, with any changes that happened with the names of any of the credentialing, the names of any diplomas, they would have to continue to update the policies. So they've made them more generic, but still appropriate.
Correct. All right. All those in favor then accepting the first reading of those policies, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining, motion carries. External written communications to the board. I had shared with you guys a couple emails that have come through. Just make sure you have reviewed those and read through them. I will say after discussing with some of those items with the superintendent, I do not find any basis for the claims that are made in the emails. So as you know, we have been very firm on the movement between programs in this time. That time is coming up when the survey is going out and there will be options made, particularly for One Direction to virtual from in person. So that is the time to do that. We are not going to cater to every single situation unless there's a medical diagnosis that requires it or an IEP that requires it. It is when you select what your program is, it's going to be for 10 weeks. We are all in agreement on that on the board still, right? Okay. All right. Ex-official student members report. Coney.
And if you didn't notice, did you turn your name to Is that nice?
And my name is spelled right. It's spelled wrong.
Yeah, who stole her? Allison stole her mic.
I'm like,
I'm in Rick Sirianni's. I just want to say, first of all, for school, it's really good to be back. I know a lot of students are just happy to be back in the building. It's a little different, but there haven't really been any problems with the masks, and everyone's been wearing them, and it's nice to have some normalcy. I know pretty much everyone agrees it's better than being in Zoom classes, so that's nice. And also, sports are going on, which is really exciting. I know I just came from my soccer game, and we love the new field. It's really nice. And we had our first game on Monday at the field, so that's really cool. It's different not having fans, but not many people go to girls' soccer games anyway. So. A lot of clubs can't really do anything right now, but I've been talking to some advisors, and we're thinking about doing virtual online meetings a little bit after school so students can join them. Yeah, and we want to get a spirit week going. I know we can't have a homecoming, but it'd be nice to still do the dress up day, get people involved.
Can I ask, did you win today? How'd you do? How'd the
We
team
did,
do?
we won. It was a lot to nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good job. Then what's the record right now for the
We're
varsity team?
3-0.
Congratulations, that's great.
Thank you.
They haven't played NT yet. So, they say that.
did you hear him, Marissa? He said you haven't played NT yet.
Okay, President's report. As you know, I'm constantly receiving communications from parents. Ones I've shared to you about complaints about possibly not being able to move between programs. The other part that we get is a lot of compliments. People who are enjoying a lot of the stuff that we are doing, particularly in the sense that the parents of the in-person students for elementary are eternally grateful for us of finding a way to get everyone back here that have chosen in-person 5 days a week. I can't express how thankful the parents are for that that have contacted me. I know that some have contacted the superintendent with that, and it's the same message out there. Again, the message to the middle school and high school, we'd love to bring everyone back and have in person every single day, but we just can't with the size of the buildings and the rooms and the number of people back. And if you watch what the governor has been saying for the past couple of days, I hate to say it this way, and I know he doesn't like to hear me. It's just a matter of time. He's gearing up to have a closure. And you can just tell, especially when he says that Western New York is a hot spot, yet he can't justify it with his own metrics. I believe that George H.W. called that voodoo economics almost. This is like a voodoo, COVID numbers. So I know that the superintendent is just basically preparing that, that if we go all virtual, that we're all ready to, with everyone with devices and hotspots and everything, at any moment that happens. So, you can see the writing on the wall down the road. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but we just have to be prepared for anything. So I'll turn it over to the superintendent then to talk maybe more about that and many other things.
Yeah, you know what? Let me comment on that. One of the things I would say is this. Right now, statewide, I think there's about 112 schools, not school districts, but 112 schools that are closed, due to COVID-related, COVID-related closures. That was the number I heard today. Our county is staying right around that 1% number with COVID. My feeling on that would be this: as long as contact tracing doesn't lead to significant numbers of people in any one of our buildings needing to be quarantined, we will do our best to stay open. Certainly, our neighbors in Niagara Falls, I think that superintendent did exactly what he should have done. Was 100% right in the move that he made to close that school. And it had to do not with the number of positive cases initially. It had to do with the number of people that, after contact tracing, forced them out of the building. And that, quite frankly, is one of the first concern we have is people's health and safety when it comes to people actually contracting COVID, right, and being within our building. But secondary to that is the impact that the number of people who have to quarantine has on us being able to run the place. Whether, if it's staff members, if it's the number of students, so those are some of the pieces that, make all of this really unpredictable. Every district will have cases, right? And when we quarantine, or the number of people that quarantine will really determine the number, whether or not we have to close, and what we have to close. But we'll do our best, certainly, to stay open. Okay, something not COVID related. I want to mention just for a moment, one of our teachers, Mr. Patrick Kramer, was actually selected as the Great Lakes Model Educator. For those that don't know, the Great Lakes Model Educators Network is a community of educators with the common goal of promoting Great Lakes literacy and stewardship in K-12 classrooms and environmental programs throughout New York's Great Lakes Basin. Mr. Kramer has been involved in numerous Great Lakes place-based professional development workshops, research projects, and education initiatives since 1997, including attending a week-long Great Lakes Academy. I can just tell you, Mr. Kramer has been instrumental in the work that we've done here on our campus with the Eco Campus Revitalization Project. He and Mr. Utek have been, two of the teachers who really spearheaded it. We've had so much help from other staff members as well, but those two really have taken on a leadership role with that. We're disappointed that this fall we weren't able to do, an addition to that and another phase to that Eco Campus project, but we are hopeful that we'll be able to do something this spring. And he actually was key in getting us funds so that we can have an architect come in and do some of the needed work that we need to do some real serious forward-looking planning along our path, which is super for our district. And I just want to congratulate Mr. Creamer and tell him thank you for all of his great work. Next, just a comment on our community education program and any other programs that are from outside organizations. Quite simply, we're just not ready to open up to those programs, okay? Our community ed will be completely virtual to start. Here's the issue. It's not that we don't have space. It's not that we couldn't, approve building permits for people to be in our buildings. It has to do with straining and stressing our staff. When our staff that's here during the day leave, our cleaners are working as hard as they can to get this place clean and ready for the next day. If we open up our buildings to others, we now have segments of our building that can't be cleaned in the same order, and it would put really an undue stress on those cleaners. I don't even know if we had, I think we just filled all of our cleaner spots, those additional day cleaner positions, but that doesn't take into account when we have people sick, when people are out, somebody gets injured, all of those things. So we said that we would enter into these additional items slowly, and we're going to do that, and we're not ready to do that. Okay, I just refuse to put that additional stress on the staff that's certainly already there. Okay. Next, this past Saturday, we had a legislative breakfast with our local, state, and one of our federal legislators. The topic was simple. It was funding for New York State schools, specifically those in Niagara, Orleans, BOCES. Okay, and I just want to give you a few numbers to put this into perspective. When it comes to the reopening costs related to COVID, okay, the districts within our BOCES have spent over $8 million on COVID-related opening costs, okay, reopening costs that they would have never had before. And you heard earlier, the withholdings happening in New York State. For 1920, the 20% state aid reduction on that last payment for our BOCES amounted to $4.4 million, okay, of revenues that, if that money isn't given, won't come in to our BOCES, okay, and the schools connected to our BOCES. For 2021, listen to this number. If that 20% state aid reduction holds true, it will be over $75 million for the schools in our BOCES. 75 million. Those are huge dollars. Pre-K alone, which I think a number of people would say is unconscionable, considering the fact that we know how important it is right now for childcare. That families have signed up believing that they were going to have pre-K for the year, and then there's this threat of a 20% withholding. For the districts in our BOCES who have the pre-K program, it's over $1.6 million will be lost with that 20% withholding. Okay, so those are some pretty serious, significant numbers. We passed those along with the impacts that they would have on our districts to our legislators. I do want to say this. We've felt like over the last so many years, at least since I've been here, that's all I can speak to. We've had really good support from our legislators, and we hope that they can continue to push the state to do the right thing. And our federal legislator, Representative Collins, who was on the call as well, can hopefully push at the federal level to get us those dollars that we need to fill that gap. Any questions on those numbers and the costs?
Staggering.
It is, it's staggering. The next, athletics was mentioned. Athletics are off to a really great start. I want to compliment our athletic department, Mr. McKenna, Ms. Biter for their work, all of our coaches for getting this up and running, making it happen. There are a few quick highlights. One, my understanding was the first golf match. One of our golfers, Anthony Delasanti, had a 6 under par. 6 under par. Those of you that golf, I mean, that's what's that? That's for 9 holes, right? He was on track. You know, right? He was on base for -12, right? Yeah. I think I may have had one. I think I may have one 9 holes where I was. I mean, then I played the next 9.
No, you definitely.
So I played the next 9, and I was well over. So, you know, 6 under par is just really incredible. That's really great. Also, our cross-country team, we just received an email. I know Mr. Sable, there were a few people on it. Received an email from our cross-country coach. They've been just really excited and ecstatic, I would say, to be able to host events the way that they are, and some of the work that's been done to make it work out there for them. They were very thankful of the facilities and facilities department for all the work that they've done to make that work, and so it's pretty neat. They also were asking for maybe some drone flyover.
Yeah, well, I had to reiterate the point though, because they wanted it during one of the runs, and I'm like, according to state guidelines, you cannot fly a drone during any interscholastic event. Practice-wise, though, come fly. You know. But yeah. Did you see our school disqualified because one of us put the drone?
And
We'll see where the falls.
The last thing I wanted to highlight was the first game that was played on turf. It was a varsity boys soccer game, 3-1 victory. They took that ball because it was the first game played on there. That would be something for one of our trophy cases. So pretty neat experience. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. The last item will be the change of commitment form, and then a little presentation in a minute here. Before I do that though, I do want to mention one of the other issues that we've had, and it's been a real issue, okay, has to do with the transportation to our afternoon BOCES program. And here's the issue. We scheduled students so they could take all the classes they need. For us, normally, when our 5th period ends in a normal year, kids get out of class, they walk down, they jump on a bus, and they drive down the road and go to BOCES. And they're always there and they're always on time. We're not living in regular times. So what's happened is those students who are in those 5th period classes, particularly if they're virtual, they're not here, they're home. So they're not 5 minutes down the road. We're using multiple buses, more than we normally do, to go pick up students to try to get them there on time. Just another thing that we're really working hard to try to do to make it right for kids. I will tell you that the transportation department has worked on a number of different plans to try to make that work, and most recently, very direct routes. We just saw the runs. It looks like, because there was a concern that they were getting there after 12:30. They should be there by 12:15. Okay, they were getting there at 12 past 12:30, 12:40, 12:45 initially. Now the latest run that I see has them arriving there at 12:25, and that was just one of the runs. There were a couple at 12:15, which would put them right there on time, and then a number that were before that. Okay, so it's still a work in progress. We're gonna keep tweaking it to try to get it so that we can get everybody there by that 12:15 point. But I think everybody understands. We're doing the absolute best that we can with the resources that we have. I'm not going to have 3 more buses out there driving kids. We are not going to put, 1 or 2 kids on a bus. We already have very small numbers on those buses just to try to get them there on time. So we're trying to find that balance, right? And we understand fully how important the BOCES, the Career Technical Education Program, is for our kids. So there's no question. Just as we know the classes that they're taking here are really important as well. One of the things you have to understand is that many of the students who are in those programs need the credits that they get from BOCES and the credits that they get here. They can't just drop the 5th period class. That may mean not graduating. So that's not an option. Okay.
Has BOCES worked with us at all in saying, okay, you know what, we're going to do a little few minutes start later, or let our kids come in later?
They're letting them come in later. They allowed us, they moved back the time. They did. They've been flexible with that. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they're not going to start their classes.
Right.
But they're allowing those students to come in later. If they
I'm just hoping they don't hold that against them for that, because that we're trying to transport them and obviously can't get them.
I think they appreciate it.
Yeah, we haven't heard that yet, but good question. I want to reiterate, and I know I've said this at a few meetings in a row now, that there's free breakfast and free lunch available to our students until December 31st. Families are able to utilize that program, whether that means if you're virtual, and you come every day to get it. If you're hybrid on the days that your students may not be here, you can come get the food. But again, it's free, and we encourage people to take advantage of that. It's an important program, and certainly during these times, we understand that there's an exceptional need that maybe doesn't exist during non-COVID times. We've said at multiple meetings, I don't know, dating back to probably last budget season, we really started talking about it. The fact that we hadn't yet received money from the state education department for the operation of the Tuscarora Elementary School. We finally, a couple months back, had a contract completed, and we're expecting payment almost immediately after that. It didn't happen immediately after that. However, it did finally happen this week. We did not receive all of the funds that are due to us at this point in the contract, but we did receive a significant amount. I want to say it's a little over $8 million that we did receive. Huge, really important for it to come in now. That is not extra money. Those dollars have all been spent in the past by our district to cover the cost, by our district budget, to cover the cost of the Tuscarora operations. Okay, but it's just, I know Allison's talked about it too, hugely important for our cash flow. And now that money has come in. So it's a small breath of relief with that. What I would say, and I asked this of the assistant commissioner, I want us to start the process, for putting together this next 5-year contract now, because it took so long to get that contract done. We went years into us actually providing the service before the contract was done. We want to start that process now so that hopefully it can be done before this 5-year contract's up.
So when do we anticipate the rest of it?
So
You said partially.
I would imagine that we would get the end of the 3rd year by the end of this year. There's kind of a reimbursement.
We're in the process of filing. We're currently in the process of filing the final cost reports for the 1920, which is year 3 of our 5-year contract. So once we complete those and submit those, we hopefully will get reimbursed for that. As far as the balance due, that is something I don't know. I think I haven't looked closely at it yet. because we just got the money yesterday, but I believe they withheld a percentage of that money.
How much?
I don't know off the top of my
10%,
head.
20%.
I don't know, I'm thinking it is.
Is it?
I don't know if it's a full 20%, but they withheld quite a bit.
Did they?
Okay, any questions on any of that before I get into the continuity of learning plan update? Okay. So you should have received one of these documents here. Should be in your folder, I think. I'll give you this one when I'm done, okay? Okay, I want to take you through where we are right now with our plans and our planning. For those, if you go to the next slide, thank you. For the regular program, for those who sign up for the regular program, in essence, what they're signing up for is the possibility to be in one of three models, okay? We could be in the fully in-person model, we could be in the, in essence, fully remote model, or we could be in a hybrid. Right now, at the secondary level, we are living in the hybrid, okay, for people who are in the regular program. Whereas in right now, at the elementary level, we're living in the 5 days of a week of instruction, so we're living in the fully in-person model, okay? In our virtual program, so there's two programs, regular program and then virtual. In the virtual program, those students are receiving all of their instruction virtual, and that would be something that would continue into the future, okay? Next, please. What we're going to ask families to do is this. If you want to change from one program to the other, whether that's from the regular program to the virtual or virtual to regular, you're going to need to submit a change in program form, okay? If you want to stay right where you are, you will need to do nothing, okay? You don't have to fill out a form, you don't have to do anything. The forms will come available on October 13th, so that's Tuesday. They'll be available till the 16th, which is a Friday. So the families will have 4 days to go in, fill it out if they'd like to make a change. Okay. Very, very, very important that families do that. If they don't, they will stay in the program that they're in, because we're, again, rightfully assuming that you want to stay if you don't fill out the change form. Okay? When you make that move and you make that change, you're making that change for weeks 11 through 40. We have a taste and a feel for what this looks like now, okay? So when people make a choice, it's for the remainder of the year. Now, understand that if we look at the regular program, we could be in any of those models during the year, right? We could be in a different model in a different building. If a building has to close, it goes to completely remote. So, but when parents make a selection, they're making a selection between, I could move anywhere between the three models in the regular program, or I want my child to be virtual for the remainder of the year. The only caveat that I'm going to add to that is this. If for some reason, could happen, everyone was able to come back, vaccination happens, COVID disappears, we could all potentially return, right? So, you know, if we're fortunate enough, weeks 31 through 40, for everybody to be back here, that would be great. I don't necessarily believe that that's real, okay? I believe it's more likely that we're going to be in the either virtual or regular program moving in through the three during the course of the year. But that would be the only thing that would possibly change what we do, okay? Yes.
Is there a reason that they decided to do that? Is that strictly because planning is difficult? That it's now for the rest of the year rather than like say another 10-week increment?
Oh, yeah. So what's really, I think, important for us is the kind of consistency and continuity for the kids, right? So now that we know what these two programs look like, we want people to lock in. To potentially rebuild a master schedule is an incredible amount of work. And to do that 4 times in a school year doesn't make any real sense. So, good question.
But again, I mentioned the 2 reasons earlier. If it's a medical reason or if it's a IEP related reason, those exceptions would be made.
Absolutely. Yep. So if we could jump to the next slide. As we make this transition, when families fill out, those that choose to, the change of program form, the high school and middle school regular to virtual program shift is a fairly simple one compared to the others. Okay? And we don't believe there's any reason for us to wait until the end of the 10 weeks if somebody wants to make that transition and that switch. Okay? And let me explain why. At the secondary level, if you're in high school and you choose to go from the regular program to the virtual program, you have the same teachers, right? You're just now going to be logging on and joining from home. You still stay with your same team, but you're just going to be doing it from home. Unlike if the people that are switching from virtual to regular, depending on all of those numbers, it could mean a lot of changes in our master schedule. It could. We don't know. We don't know until we see those numbers. So making the switch from regular to virtual, if you're high school or middle school, as soon as you fill out that form and the building staff is able to act on those changes, they'll notify you and you'll be able to make that switch. And you won't have to wait until November 17th, okay? For all of the other programs, depending on the numbers, for the transitions from any of the other programs to the other, the numbers could change staffing, could change, sections, what sections we have to move people into. So those moves will all be done at the same time, which will be November 17th, Tuesday, November 17th. Okay. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand?
Going from virtual to the regular.
So if I go down these other 4, if you're elementary and you're going from regular to virtual, remember we only have so many virtual teachers. If a large number of people wanted to do that, we'd have to add virtual teachers, and we'd have to take them from our regular classroom teachers. Okay, funds are not unlimited, right? We can't, so we'd have to do some shifting. So that's why that one has to be November 17th. The high school, middle school, I just talked a little bit about. If you go from virtual into regular, it could potentially mean in a particular class that we'd have more numbers than could be socially distanced, right? And at the elementary level, going from virtual and then coming back to regular, that could also lead to us needing additional sections. We're going to have to be very strategic in where those students are placed. Okay, and we have a plan for that, and we have a couple plans for that, maybe 3, possibilities for that. But it's a big undertaking, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Is there a saturation point for that elementary?
Going
from virtual
So in other words, if everyone wanted to do it, could we do it? Probably not, and it would be as much about space as it would be anything else. I don't think that that's what's gonna happen, but I don't, if you would have told me that this percent that we're at right now, it would be virtual, I wouldn't have thought it was that percent. If you would have said, we would have had a change in how people could transport. So it's really hard to predict. I think that's why we need to see the numbers and then make adjustments. But we're gonna need time for those bottom four to make those changes. Okay. Next. So when it comes to the pre-K program, there's no real planned changes to these programs. One of the things that we've talked about before, and we got the answer to the one question that I know Steve posed, was could we have, if the 20% funding doesn't look like it's coming back to us, could we have families pay that 20% and keep all of our kids in the program? That is a possibility. It's something that I've said, I think around week 10 we need to talk about for the second semester. So that is something just to keep in mind about this program, because we are holding at, is it 101, 102 students right now? Do we know if it's pre-K? Okay. We're right about that 101, 102 number, okay? Wait, what? They cannot pay? I thought we got an answer back that they could.
Let's double check that,
Okay.
just because I did some research on it too.
So-
It said if it's part of the UPK program, we create,
Okay, so it sounds like maybe there might be someone else weighing in on whether or not we can do this. So we're gonna have to look.
just wanna double.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, listen, what we'll do, we'll make sure about that funding piece that we come back with some more information. We did receive initial information that we could do it, okay? There was a way that we needed to do it, but we could do it. So if that's not the case, we'll have to let people know. So that's pre-K. Again, no real plan changes there. Elementary. For the elementary regular program, remember there's 3 possible models. There's no real changes planned for that. However, numbers, as we were just talking about, could potentially play a role. And we just want to be really honest about that. We have been all along. So we'll see what that number shift is. Next, the elementary virtual program. We did make some adjustments to this. It certainly has been a learning process. One of our concerns all along was, what's the right amount of time for an elementary student? Just think of kindergarten or first grader to be in front of a screen, and trying to find that kind of comfort level with the amount of on-screen time and the amount of asynchronous learning. Remember, in some cases, family members are sitting with their children through this and through all of the kind of live streamed lessons, trying to help. So we've made some adjustments. The adjustments are these. One of the issues has been time for communication with families and teachers. We had like a 9 to 9:30, almost like a homeroom period where they would be on a virtual homeroom. We've cut that by 15 minutes and made the first 15 minutes time for teachers so that they can be answering back to emails, communicating. Those in the morning, some of the first issues are technology related. We do have a technology department who can answer some of those questions, but if it's where do I find this plan, where do I find this PowerPoint, that's really a question for the teacher. So we did that. If I jump to the end of the day, we also adjusted some of the time there really to mirror more what happens in our buildings at about 3:10, 3:15. Our students are getting prepared for dismissal. That time from like 3:15 to 3:30, 3:10 to 3:30 will be additional time for the virtual teachers to work on their communication, sending stuff to families. It's a very different world. So it really made sense for us to do that. I would say the biggest change to the program, and it was part of the plan all along, it just hadn't started yet, was to have some of the small group instruction. Now that the teachers know their students, they can now group them appropriately. So there's actually a time during their day where they'll be working with different small groups. Schedule will go out, families will know when they log in to work in smaller groups, whether it be on math, or reading. So really important, I think, that we're making those shifts. It's certainly things that we've heard from both the teachers, the parents, with that particular program, and I think it'll make a positive difference for our families. The secondary program, there's not a real significant change to this program either. The teachers have, just done an outstanding job. They're doing something that in a lot of districts isn't being done. They're making it so that our students could really keep their electives, stay in the program. They're teaching some who are home, some that are with them every day. And we understand the ask there. We understand the challenge there. One of the things that is certainly of note, and you've probably seen, there's districts out there that have, full certain days where they're not with students. We're trying our best to give our students, more class time. However, I certainly accept that there's a need for some planning between departments that's been lost. A lot of our teachers are pretty much locked in the room with either the kids who are there and the kids who are online. The time in between classes, the time to talk with colleagues, it's just, a lot of their planning time has gone to the tech side, right? So they're spending, not as much time, on their lessons as maybe they could have or would have in the past. So the last slide, if you could, I believe it's the last one. Secondary, that program hasn't changed. Sorry. So what I'm doing here is making a change. This will affect all of our programs. Okay, it's providing some asynchronous days that our students will receive asynchronous learning. But on those days, our teachers will be able to do some planning. Okay, they'll be able to work with colleagues. They'll be able to work on continuing to improve their craft, not just with their lesson plans, but on the tech side, right? My hope is that our teachers at the end of the year are, light years ahead of where they were when this year started when it comes to utilizing technology in the classroom. And I know a lot of them already feel like they've probably been in Lightspeed and made a significant jump. These days, this time, it's approximately once a month. We'll give them that time to do it. And I think it makes really good sense. So what we will do is we will send this out as a change of schedule. It's one of the reasons if you were looking at a calendar and you said, why November 17th? That's a Tuesday. Are we making the change for those 4 groups? It's because that Monday, November 16th, will actually be an asynchronous day. Really important that that first one's on that day, because the next day, kids will be switching programs, right? So they'll have some time that day to say, oh, these people are coming back into my room. These people haven't been. We are, this is very important, going to do an orientation for students who are flip-flopping. It's taken weeks for our elementary virtual kids and families to get where they are with technology. It's taken weeks for our secondary teachers to get where they are. If someone's switching to virtual and they were here, like think about that at the elementary level, and now they're going to virtual, it's not going to be easy. Those families are going to go through some of the same learning processes that our other families have already gone through. So we're going to try to head that off with some, let's call it, professional development for families, for students, some orientation to hopefully get them up to speed so that they're ready, right? And I think that, this plan will be something we can see through to the end of the year. That said, our continuity of learning teams will continue to meet. We'll continue to look at possibly better ways to do some of the things that we're doing. And if we can do that, we'll certainly bring them up, bring them to this group. It's fluid, it's flexible, and we want to make sure that we do it the best way we can.
Question for this, when it's the asynchronous days for all students, is that going to, that also counts for the K to 5 students that are in person?
It would be for all students, that's correct. Yeah. That's right. I think one of the things that's really important is for those teachers too, it's a completely different world for them, we don't have the amount of PD time. So give you an example. As a district, I think one of the things that we've done well over the last handful plus maybe years is some of the professional development that brings teachers together to be teacher leaders, right? And last year, a lot of that was lost. And this year, quite frankly, a lot of that is lost. So the way we used to do it, we used to bring substitutes. We used to bring departments together, have substitutes that would jump into classrooms for part of a day, periods, whole days in some cases. That's gone. So for our teachers to learn from other teachers on some of the things that are really working, this is a really good time for them to do that. So,
Now, another question with these days. For the secondary, where it's are going every other day, have we looked to make sure this is not like one particular letter group?
Good question. What we're going to do is we're going to put out a new calendar, new schedule, so it's almost as if these days don't happen in the schedule. So somebody wouldn't skip and then be here twice. We'll put out a new schedule that will get them every other day. Correct. So if it was a black team day the day before and that day happens, then the next day after it'll be a red team day. So we'll put out a
switch things.
Yeah. Right.
Now, the state's not going to also come down and look at this and say, you're making these in the superintendent conference days?
Not at all. They're not superintendent's conference days. They're asynchronous days, which are absolutely allowed. If they weren't, every district that you know of that has Wednesdays or Mondays off would be in hot water. Yeah. Good question.
Any other questions by the board members for superintendent? Okay then.
Thank you. Sorry, long-winded.
Oh, a lot of good information. All right, reports to the board for finance. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the recommendation of the business official for the funding of reserves. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that item? Anyone have any questions on it? All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. Any old business for sake of a man right now?
What's that?
Old business. Any? New business. I'd like to call for a motion for the approval of the charter for Niagara Charter for another 5 years. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion of that? Any of the new people have any questions on that whole process? And Niagara Charter really does not affect us very much. It's the falls. The background on that is that when the Niagara Charter was first founded, the falls at the time had something in place where they could not have a charter school within the boundaries of Niagara Falls. So they got a building next to it. So, and I know when she said there that they're going to try finding something in the falls, it's still not going to work. And nothing's changed. But one of the concerns, and I've been talking to a couple of board members there who, of course, this affects their district more than ours, and they're like, well, we don't get a say in the whole process of this because it's not in their board. It asked a couple of financial questions, and one of them is, this is something I brought up to the superintendent as a discussion, and I brought up this a couple of times before. They have the last audit that they have almost like a 200% fund balance. So they have like almost double what their operating budget is in the bank, as opposed to us who only have 4%. So I'm just like, it's not. And I pulled up other. What was that?
What's their budget?
It was 4.7 million the last audit that they had. So, I mean, it's smaller, and there's more to it because it's really, I don't know if you've taken a look at charter school budgets. There's some weird lines in there. So it looks like their operating budget's 4.7, but then they have all these reserves and savings and things like that that don't fall into our reserve categories. So it's really hard to decipher that piece. I looked into the ones in New York City, like Sussex Academy and stuff like that have like millions upon millions upon millions of dollars in there. It was like 780 million that they have in their reserve fund, and they can save it because there's no 4% fund balance rule. So, you know, one of the comments that people in the Fallsworth, that money, if they're not spending, should go back to the taxpayer every year. They should still have a 4% fund balance rule. So it was interesting that she said it was because, you know, their bill that goes towards their rent and everything, which my comment is, well, you have that built into your budget because that's what's in your expenditure budget is in there already. So why do you have that, you know, that much in reserve? So, anyways, that was my question. That's why I brought that piece up with it. It is there's a little magic to how their money is being saved. I'll put it that way. All right, all those in favor then, please say aye. Aye. Opposed or abstaining? Motion carries. Any other new business right now?
Do we need to take a motion on the audit stuff, or is that?
They have to finalize the audit before we
It's
accept.
already done, it was in your.
Yeah.
It was one of the items.
Well, yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was on-
I missed the external one. I saw the internal one on there. All right. Any items for board discussion? I guess we already did that part, and we're going to public comments. Okay. Yeah, I ask. Board member comments right now? John, anything? If you haven't had a chance, I know Bob and Micah and I were out there for that first soccer game, and it is impressive.
Very impressive.
Very, very impressive. I wish you would have went with the heated seats in the stands.
Yeah.
You know how it is with this kind of weather, but you know, it was very, honestly, it was very, very
We
impressive.
just have to go to the press box. They got everything.
I know. That was the only thing which was interesting is that I know that John was trying to control the music across the field, but because it's Bluetooth, you have to basically be there. So it's that was the only little hiccup with the sound system when he went to do it. So other than that, it was really nice.
Really nice to see it being used.
Yeah.
Hopefully it expands going forward.
Different feel. Very. I mean,
Different feel
it
to it.
feels like it elevated the campus. With it out there. So good work on everything with that. I know it was all Allison, not you. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Actually, just the comment on that, because it's real that, and we talked about it a little bit in the audit committee. I mean, the board's backing of that, the community is backing of that, and all of the other capital project work that we've had. That was something that we're one of the few districts around that didn't have a turf field. So I think we're a little bit behind on that, and it looks awesome. So the support for that was great. But all of the other capital project work that we've been doing over the past, 5-6 years, it's just it's incredible, and the support, and it's needed. I mean, we're talking about most of our capital project work has been roofs, lights, technology, not having Wi-Fi. I mean, we talked about this before. Imagine not having the Wi-Fi in our buildings like we did about 5 years ago in what we're dealing with right now. I mean, it would be nothing but packets. I mean, that would be our only option. I think that the community really just deserves a lot of credit for supporting those really important projects, and the business office for making sure that we have the reserve funds to do it. So every time Allison says no to me, it's for the right reason.
We'll have the free kittens to hand out though. All right. But no, again, if you had a chance to get out to an event there, please. I mean, as a player, it must have been excellent on there. So, and it's just so big. You're on there on the grass. It's just like never ending turf. All right. At this time, then, I would like to call for motion to enter executive session for the purpose of employment of particular people and the sale of real property. It's Moved in a
I'll
second.
second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining, motion carries.
We're gonna,